will we will have it up on our YouTube channel in a day or so. So no worry about saving any information. You'll be able to watch it as many times as you want. So just to introduce some of the folks you'll be hearing from tonight, or myself first. I am, as I said, Dee Clarkin with Indivisible Montgomery. Indivisible Montgomery is a chapter of Indivisible, obviously in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we are, if you're not familiar with the Washington, D.C. area and you're coming in from somewhere else, we are the most populated county in the state of Maryland, and we are located just north and west of Washington, D.C. So Indivisible Montgomery was formed in 2016. We worked we work primarily with other grassroots groups here in the DC area. And that's why we're working tonight, and delighted to be partnering with our friends from Jaywalkers Action Group. And Jaywalkers are experts on phone banking and all other kinds of direct voter contact methods, so that they will be leading the training tonight, so that you are in expert hands tonight. Just a little bit more about Indivisible Montgomery. We do have about 2,400 members again, in Montgomery County, Maryland. Our congressional districts are Congressional District 4, 6, and 8. We do all kinds of advocacy work with our members. We put pressure on our Democratic electeds when we need them to do more, and we thank them when they do well. We also work on a number of we'll work in elections, and this year we will be focusing on Virginia. Our goal is to win a blue trifecta in Virginia and build that blue wall next to us here in Maryland. So we'll be working quite a lot. And so tonight, one of the things we decided to do was to see if we could help folks skill up on phone banking in anticipation of doing all that work for for the Virginia 2025 elections, the governorship and the House of Delegates. So personally, I phone bank, but I'm not the most comfortable phone banker. And I just can't wait tonight to hear how I can be more comfortable, more successful. And that is going to be what is going to happen with you. I think little housekeeping here. As I said earlier, for the folks who came in, we are recording the meeting. We'll have it up on YouTube, and we will hold our questions until the end. We'll have a question and answer period. So with that, I'd like to kick it over to our first speaker from Jaywalkers Action Group, Jane. So,
It's going to be me. It's going to
oh,
be me,
excuse me,
Dee.
Steve. Steve,
I hope
great.
so.
Steve,
Yep. Yep.
perfect.
Uh,
Take it away.
okay. Thanks, Dee. I'm Steve Pressman. I'm going to start in part because I am a member of both Indivisible Montgomery and Jaywalkers, as is Susan Zengerle, who's here, and Susan can wave. She's going to be handling the chat and monitoring it. If you have any comments, questions, you can put them in the chat. First, just a few words about Jaywalkers. It was started 17 years ago by a group of Obama campaign alums here in Montgomery County. Like Indivisible Montgomery, Jaywalkers works to elect Democrats in important races around the country. Unlike Indivisible Montgomery, Jaywalkers is a small group of organizers. We aren't a membership organization. We don't have big meetings. We don't have committees. We don't even have a budget, at least as far as I know. So we're sort of lean and mean. We do one thing, and that is organize direct voter contact actions. We have planned and run all kinds of those, text banks, phone banks, canvases, letter writing campaigns, but the primary activity is phone banking. Okay, next slide, please. We have, actually, it's the numbers I want to hit.
This one. Yep.
We have made more than 2 million phone calls and had more than 100,000 conversations for 60 different candidates over the years. Thanks, Jane. We've worked directly with Democratic presidential campaigns and state coordinated campaigns. And before COVID, our phone banks were in people's houses, and you would go and you'd get cookies and coffee and other goodies. Now, of course, they're all on Zoom. No cookies, but they are convenient. You can attend from anywhere, and you don't have to sit on somebody's lumpy sofa. Despite the switch to Zoom, we have made it a priority to keep the sense of community and camaraderie that we've had over the years that we've developed with our phone bankers. As a result, a lot of our phone bankers are return participants. They come from all over. They come from many different organizations, although a number of our regulars are from Indivisible Montgomery. We partner with Indivisible Montgomery on all sorts of activities, especially phone banks. And last thing, if you're wondering, as many have in the past, where the name Jaywalkers came from, one of the founders was Nancy J. Walker. So that's why we're the Jaywalkers. Okay, next slide. Our goals.
John, did you want to say anything about jaywalkers before we move into the phone banking part?
About jaywalk.
You're on mute, John.
Yeah, I think Steve pretty much covered it.
Okay.
We're a rollicking group of organizers and it's all about talking to voters and having conversations. The one most important message that was put forth when they were training organizers in the Obama campaign was millions of conversations between millions of ordinary people is what actually gets the job done. And we've been working on that project ever since.
So now let's talk about the goals for tonight. Briefly, first goal for tonight is to explain why phone banking is an important part of voter outreach. We'll talk about the goals of phone banking, what we're trying to accomplish, what to expect when you phone bank, the good and the bad. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. We'll tell you the truth. And we'll do an overview of how an actual phone bank works and what you'll need to phone bank. And then last, tips for effective phone banking, sort of do's and don'ts. We won't go into all the mechanics of phone banks because they do vary from campaign to campaign and dialer or system to dialer. But we'll hit the important points, I think. And then after the slides, we'll do a Q&A. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Now, Jane, for why phone banking.
Okay. Hi, everybody. All right, so let's talk about why we phone bank to begin with. Okay. Well, there's nothing like a one-on-one conversation, right? It offers a dialogue that you can't get with letter writing or postcards. And I'm sure many of you have done letter writing and postcard work, and that's good. That definitely has a good role to play in the process, but there's really nothing like having a back and forth with somebody. It's also more efficient than canvassing. So you can talk to more people. You can imagine an hour how many people you can talk to when you're walking around the block versus when you're, constantly calling one person after another. So there's an efficiency there. And we can change minds, and we do provide critical information that does drive people to the polls. Some races, as you know, are won by very slim margins. And so your calls and your conversations can really make a difference. Research shows that phone banking can lift voter turnout by 2.5% to 4%. So a swing left study says 2.5%, a Temple University says 4%. So let's just say it's somewhere in that mix. And that might feel really low, like a low number to you, but consider this, right? In 2024, Trump won Georgia by about 2 percentage points, Michigan, 1.5. Pennsylvania, 2.3. It was lower in Wisconsin, and in New Hampshire, he won by a margin of under 3 percentage points. So that 2.5% to 4% can make all the difference in the world. In Virginia, right, where we'll be focusing in the coming months, in 2024, in the 5th Congressional District, in the Republican primary, McGuire defeated Good by 0.6 percentage points. That close. In 24, the 2nd Congressional District race, Kiggins won by a margin of 3.06%, and Youngkin defeated McAuliffe by a margin of a mere 2%. So those calls, that 2.5% to 4%, that can really make or break a campaign. So what are we trying to do on our calls? That was the second goal. I'm going to pass that on to John. He's going to cover that.
So there is a continuum that happens in the campaign that determines what they're choosing to do, what they put, how they build the script and the list that you're calling. And the general way it works is this. First, we gather information about the people we're calling. They don't have lists. Each campaign is a new entity. It doesn't have a list that was called on yesterday or last week or last month. The last time any list of voters was called upon in Virginia, my guess would be was November, right? So those lists, a lot has changed. People have moved out of state. People have moved into state. People have changed phone numbers. Some people have died. Some people's names have changed. Lots of things have changed. And people's opinions have changed, right? We've seen the polls move. So the first thing they want to do is start calling lists of voters and confirming that these people that we think are supporters, finding out where they are on what we call the affinity scale. So are they a strong Democrat? Are they leaning Democrat? Are they independent? Are they leaning Republican? Are they, MAGA? Right? If they're MAGA, we can get off the phone really quickly with them. But identifying all of those folks when early on in the process, we call folks, even if that's all we find out, even if the entire call, all we find out is that they're an independent voter, that they're not leaning either way, or they're a strong Democrat, or they're a MAGA Republican. Identifying that puts them into a bucket that we then use later on as we go down the line. So later on down the line, we might start calling all the lean Democrats and with a specific sort of persuasive script designed to help those people get more firmly in our camp and maybe assuage some of their doubts. And then later on down the line, after we've done those and talked to independents, maybe there are some lists that we're going to be calling people who are lean Republican, but they're just leaning. So maybe there's a chance, and that's a different kind of script with some different messaging. So the order that things are done in are important. I had a good conversation with an organizer from the Abigail Spanberger campaign. She's running for governor in Virginia. She's a wonderful congresswoman for Virginia who we helped initially get elected in 2018. We made 97,000 phone calls for her. That's probably the biggest election of this cycle, would be her gubernatorial election. It's very important that we get her elected. They are working right now on voter ID. So very simple questions to establish where they are on that affinity scale. They're also asking and listening. The scripts also involve asking people and listening to the issues that they're interested in, so we can get a sense as to what issues are really bubbling to the top now, because they can use that in their campaign to gather that information. So a lot of the early phone bank work is gathering information, right? We also want to introduce the candidate in Virginia. I'm sure a lot of people know who Abigail Spanberger is, but she's a congresswoman. She's not a senator there. She's not a national uh, candidate yet. So I think they probably want to get her name out there a lot more as well. Um, they will likely want to position. I would imagine they would want to position her as a Democrat. There are some campaigns, maybe in like rural Pennsylvania, some of these like real swingy campaigns where they sort of want to obfuscate and come across more like an independent. But I'm sure for Abigail, we'll be saying we're calling for Abigail Spanberger. She's the Democratic candidate for governor in Virginia. Um, and then I'm not sure if we're leaving messages early or not. That changes from phone bank to phone bank. But sometimes they leave messages when they really want to get a candidate's number out. We may do that more because once the coordinated campaign kicks in, we will be working on when we're working in Virginia, we'll be working on some delegate candidate stuff as well as, when we call about Abigail, we'll also be talking about the whatever delegate candidate there is for that district that we're calling into. They can pinpoint that. So if we're calling a certain list in a certain area, we'll also talk about the more local candidates. And sometimes their name recognition is very important because sometimes no one's ever heard of them. We also may do if you get a strong Democrat, we may do there may be some recruitment elements into the script, and there may even be a way to, probably not early on, but eventually there may be a way to actually sign people up for events. Most of the time with recruitment, you just ask somebody if they're interested in helping out. I like to say, hey, would you be interested? I'm glad you're such a strong Democrat. Would you be interested in helping out with the campaign as I'm doing it right now? I'm just making phone calls from my house. You could help in the same way. And then they just say yes, no, or maybe, and you basically check a box and move on. Can we go next slide? So as I said, once we've gone through a period, usually we get pretty far into September before we start seeing a lot of persuasion stuff. That usually mostly happens in October. Then you get into persuasion conversations. And persuasion, it sort of sounds more daunting than it is. The way I've always done that is to say, um, if someone says, I just haven't really decided, I'm really right in the middle. I'll say, well, what are the issues that really matter to you? What things are you thinking about when you think about a candidate and what you want them to do for you? And some people will launch right into what they think is important, and then you can have a conversation about that with them, and you can talk about what's important to you or what you think about that, or why you think this candidate is really important. And some people are low information folks, and they'll just say, well, I don't really know. And then I always jump in with something like, hey, I'm volunteering right now because uh, the climate is very important to me, and democracy is very important to me, and I don't like fascism or whatever, whatever I want to say is important to me. Um, uh, you don't have to spend a lot of time talking, or any time really, talking to people who are, right wing Trumpers, right? The full MAGA crowd. There's no point in having a long conversation with them. As soon as you get, one of them on the line, you just say, thank you very much. Sorry to bother you. And you move on to the next call. Um, early on, you might get some of those, and then later on, when they're doing some list cleanup, you might get some. But generally, they're not. The campaigns aren't trying to get us. They want us not to be calling MAGA people, right? So it's not that we never get them on the line. Sometimes you do, and sometimes it's funny. Um, Sometimes it's not so funny. But we just get off those calls quick and move on, and we don't worry about it too much, right? Um, the script, often the call system and the script will have lots of information that you can use about the candidate and their positions. We also in our phone banks, we create dashboards that make those very easy to navigate and see. We really spend a lot of time trying to make the top talking points visual, and work with campaigns to make sure we have the current talking points and all of those sorts of things. And then once you get through the persuasion point, and now you've identified all the people who have said they're going to vote for you or they're leaning towards voting for you, and maybe you've converted some of these independents or lean Republicans, further down the scale, and now you have what they call the universe of our voters, and they do a thing called locking their universe, where they go, these are our voters. And then we get into get out the vote and driving turnout. And the main goal of that effort is to just call those folks and make sure they go vote. And that starts with early voting. You start getting into some turnout calls. A lot of times they have, what I've found is a lot of times the people in state will get into the turnout calls early, and then the people out of state will continue to clean up lists and things and try and find additional people that we can call to make sure they vote. That's the gist of what we do. We're going to talk about call systems. Jane, I didn't tell you when we were in the pre here, but they're in Open VPB now, and they'll move. Jane will talk more about this, and they're going to move to a dialer a little later, hopefully in July.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
And John mentioned this too, but while even throughout all of that process, you're still going to get a certain number of wrong numbers and beeps, and someone doesn't live here anymore, and this number has been disconnected. You'll always get some of those in the calling system. And so just know that while that's frustrating, you're doing the good work of cleaning those lists continually, so that as we get closer, we're working on a pretty good list.
Yeah, that's the data of this is a MAGA voter, this is a supporter, this person is deceased, this person is no longer living in state. All of those data points are really important when we choose our list for get out the vote.
Good. All right, so you're listening to all this and you're thinking, okay, but what about all those hangups, right? Aren't there a lot of hangups? And I'm calling for 2 hours and I'm getting hung up on a lot. And it's true, there are some hangouts. The dialing systems are getting better and better at weeding those out, so that by the time you get to someone, you're more likely to talk to a person, but somebody may still answer the phone, hear who you are, and just hang up. So that can be frustrating. So we want to take you through a typical night of phone calls and what you can expect. Because when you go in with the right expectations, it's a lot less frustrating. Okay. So this might be a typical night where you call, the dialer calls, you introduce yourself and click, somebody hangs up. Or the next big group might be say, no, thank you, not interested. Okay. Or some people might say to you, how I vote is none of your business. Thank you very much. Click, hang up. Okay. And so that might be the biggest chunk of people you talk to. But then you'll get a whole bunch of people, especially as those lists are cleaned up and you're getting into turnout, that are saying, yep, we're on your team, we're voting D. And that can be very uplifting. We love those calls. We cheer each other on. We encourage them to bring their friends and family. And that feels good when you hear people out there wanting to vote Democrat, right? Some people will say, sorry, not on your team, we're voting the other way, but they're polite and that's fine, okay? And then you get those calls of gold where they listen, where you can have one of those persuasion conversations where they say, yeah, I hear you. I'll think about that. I'll consider. Or, all right, you know what? You sold me. Or thank you so much for that polling information. I had no idea, but now I know where to go and I'll make sure to get there. Or thank you for reminding me that I need to bring my ID because I probably would have gone without it, right? Then you know that you got somebody to the polls and that feels good. And then the really smallest percentage of calls, and this doesn't happen very often, but as John said, sometimes you do get a MAGA on the phone and they can be quite rude and you get some expletives and it doesn't feel good. But as John said, you just say, sorry to bother you, have a good night, and you move on to the next call. That's the smallest percentage because mostly we're calling Democrats, independents, and friendly Republicans. Those rude MAGAs are a pretty small percentage of who we call, but it's reality and it happens, okay? This is what we call for, right? We call for those, I hear you. You gave me some good things to think about. I'll definitely consider when I go to the polls. That's an amazing conversation. That's a meaningful conversation, and we celebrate that. That's why we do what we do, right? So on a typical night, if it's a 2-hour phone bank, you might make 50 to 60 calls, meaning the dialer dialed 50 to 60 calls. And you might, out of that, have 5 to 15 conversations. You might have 2 conversations and have kind of a lousy night. You might have 13 and have a pretty good night, okay? You're usually talking to supporters. Again, it depends on the list and the goal. You might have a few meaningful conversations with people. And if you're lucky, you'll have that one amazing conversation where you know you pushed a vote and you can go to bed knowing you did a good job. That's a typical night, okay? You go in knowing what to expect, you'll feel a lot better about the effort, okay? Now, that may not seem like a lot to you, your one amazing call out of 50, 60 calls, but multiply that by the other people in your group. So say you come to one of our phone banks and you're with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people. And not only did you have an amazing call, but 10 others in the group had an amazing call. And then you multiply that by the groups. Think of all the groups in just Montgomery County local to where we are, or your local area, and groups all around the country. And suddenly those numbers start to add up. And those numbers can make or break an election. And those numbers today can save democracy. Those numbers can make that 2.5% to 4% lift that we need to swing a market. So let's go through a little bit of what it looks like to phone bank and how it works. We have some sample slides that we can show you. We're not going to go through every one of them, but just to give you a sense, okay? So if you've never phone banked before, okay, this is what you might need. You would need a computer for sure. You can use a desktop, you can use a laptop, you can use an iPad or a smaller device, but it's not ideal because you need to really look and maneuver around the screen. Some calling systems will require a phone, like OpenVPB, that requires a phone, if I remember correctly, right? But another one that we used a lot in the last election cycle, you could do everything with your computer. You can speak through it. You can dial through it. It's good to have a set of headphones just to block out all the noise so you can hear clearly, so they can hear you clearly. We'd like you to have pen and paper there because we ask you in our phone banks to keep track of the number of calls that you make, and that's the number of times the dialer dials and hits a number, no matter what happens. If there's a no answer, that counts. And the number of actual conversations that you've had with people. The dialer systems do a lot of tracking on their own end, but at Jaywalkers, we like to keep track of, as you saw, we were able to tell you how many calls we've made in our history. We like to keep track of that. And then stay hydrated. Have some water or something there. Optional, if you want something stronger. We know a lot of
Is that
people
water,
who
Jane?
sit
Is
there
that
and
water
make...
in there? Is that what that is?
We know a lot of people who sip their wine while they're calling, right? Sometimes you need that. But yeah, just stay hydrated. And that's really what you will need when you come into phone bank. Are you waving, Dee? Do you call with your glass of wine? All right, so here's how it works. If you sign up, we hope you'll sign up with the Jaywalkers phone bank. And You'll receive notifications just by being here tonight. You'll receive email notifications when we are promoting phone banks, and we'll likely also be promoting this cycle on Mobilize. So once you sign up for one of our phone banks, you'll get a link to a Zoom session, just like you did tonight, for a certain date and time that you signed up for, and you'll enter that Zoom. And one or two, usually at least two of us, are there to greet you, to give you a warm welcome, and to brief you on the campaign, who we'll be calling for, what the goal is, and any important updates and information. All right, so we'll do a lot of the legwork and the research for you, so that when you come in, you really know, you hear and learn what we're calling about. Okay. In the chat, we'll provide the link to the automatic dialer. Okay, so just like there's a chat here tonight, same thing, we'll provide a link to the automatic dialer. And if you have been calling now for a few times, you can go right to the dialer and start calling. If you're new or you need a refresher, or if it's a different dialing system that you're not used to, we will train you. We'll take you through the dialer. We'll help you with technology. We'll help you with questions about the campaign. We are there for you to support you and to answer all your questions. All right. You'll keep the Zoom on your computer screen, so it'll always be on in the background. So even though you clicked through to the dialer, you could move the dialer back and forth and click back to the Zoom at any time. Once you're there on a training, we'll show you how to turn off the sound and all that good stuff. We don't have to get into that tonight. But you'll keep that Zoom screen on so that you can come back to us at any time easily for questions, or if we have updates for you, we may put them in the chat. So you want to sort of stay, and then we like to talk to you afterwards and just hear about your experience. Okay, so the dialers that we typically use, Scale to Win, Hub Dialer, Open VPB, those are the most common ones. We've been using, last cycle, we used Scale to Win quite a lot. So those are the ones that I'm going to sort of take you through right now. But it's the same basic concept, no matter which dialer we're using. So for Scale to Win, we like that one because you don't need any account, right? So they'll just, the first time you go on, they'll ask for your name and email, but they don't require a password or anything. After that, you just get on. You can just use your computer. They all work on most browsers. Scale to Win happens to be the easiest to navigate, but the others aren't difficult either. So as I said, we'll provide you with that link to the dialer. And the dialer basically tells you everything. It tells you how to connect your phone and your computer if you're using both. You can preview the script ahead of time. It connects you to the caller. And it provides, the dialers have gotten a lot better about providing really good candidate and polling information right on your screen. So this is kind of what it looks like. Once you go to the chat, you click on the link to the dialer, it takes you to a page. This is the Scale to Win example, where you can preview the script, or you can start calling with this computer device. Or if you want to, for whatever reason, use your device and a phone. And with each of those options, it'll give you more information. So let's pretend that we're clicking on preview the script, and it takes you to the first page. And it says it's a script preview mode. And you'll see that it has your introductory message. You announce yourself, and you ask for the person's name will automatically come up. And along that right-hand panel, you'll see talking points about a campaign. So you might read things about the campaign and their key messages and what they stand for. When we get closer to get out the vote, you might see polling information there and key dates about early voting. So there's a lot there for you to reference. And basically, the interface is really simple. You're either talking to the correct person, or you're going to get one of these reasons why you're not talking to the correct person. If you click on any of those other than talking to the correct person, you're going to get an option to move on to the next call. And that gets logged in. You don't have to log any of that in manually. And that ends that call. If you are talking to the right person, it'll take you to the next question. So these were slides that Scale to Win did as an example. So they're obviously not political names. But so the next question might be, fantastic, I'm calling today because there's an important election coming up. Who are you planning to vote for? And you just click on the answer that they give you. Okay. Or another example, can we count on your support? And you just click on one of these. And whichever one of these you click on, we're not going to go through all of them now, but they will tell you what the next talking point is for that answer. This is one where I hear you, I respect his commitment to acting, but I'm for Oprah because of her philanthropy, and that's more of a persuasion type script. Okay. And when you get to the end, it'll show you a summary of your answers. You can have the option of continue calling, which will just bring you to the next person, or you can end the session completely. Very simple. You click a button, it tells you what to say. You can put anything into your own words, but that's the gist of it. Okay. Scale to Win gives you a little comedy in between while they're waiting for the dialer to hit. So this is as the dialer is in the background dialing somebody, it gives you a little pun. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's the funniest joke of all the jokes. That one you just right there.
I think you have a low threshold.
They're like popsicle jokes.
All right, Rachel, you're on. Oh, you're on mute, Rachel. Unmute yourself.
I'm Rachel. I've been with Jaywalkers for a really long time. I am one of those reluctant phone bankers. John will attest to this because he's known me for a long time. I still don't love making calls, but I do it because it's really important. And so when the session is over, you'll come back to the Zoom screen. And this goes back to what Steve was saying about community. We really believe in building community. It matters. It matters so that you know you're not alone and that other people care and are doing this. And it matters if you get a great call because you can talk about it and that everybody can cheer you on. And it matters if you get a lousy call because everybody can remind you that it isn't personal to you and that it happens to all of us. We've all gotten some really crummy calls, and it's just really a nice way to end the evening. It's usually about 10 minutes at the end of a phone banking session, and it does build community, and community just is so important. I think so many people these days, especially because of the internet and everything happening through screens, they end up feeling really isolated. And this is our way. When we were sitting shoulder to shoulder with you, 30 people in a phone bank, you felt that community. But this is our way of trying to build community and make everybody understand they are part of something much bigger than just them, and that other people share their beliefs and share their feelings and their anxieties and their fears and get nervous about phone banking, but you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it, is what I always say, because it isn't my favorite thing to do and I'm not a natural at it. So, but we ask you to log your calls and conversations as Jane discussed. We debrief and we celebrate and we commiserate, and then we provide links for you to sign up for another session because there's always more phone banking to happen. Let's move on. So there are definitely tips for success, and they do help me. You try and dial with a smile. You don't have to smile while the lame jokes are happening. But when the phone clicks in, I try to just smile when I say hello, and it does make a difference. You always have a chance to preview the script and get comfortable putting it into your own words. I've seen how these scripts are written. It's really clunky and behind the scenes. And so sometimes the scripts are unnatural and they feel awkward to say. They're too long. you need to read the script and put it into your own words so it sounds natural. You do not need to read the script verbatim. It's not necessary. Talk like you're talking to a real person, not like you're some kind of computer-generated AI script. Be yourself. There are things that I do, and different people introduce themselves differently. Different people have different kinds of ways to talk to people, but be yourself. And review. The thing that makes people really nervous, including me, is the background information and not knowing enough about the candidate. If we're going to spend a lot of time talking to Abigail Spanberger, you're going to get to know Abigail Spanberger's positions and situations. But all of these state delegates that might end up being like the low-hanging, below the tip of the iceberg, you won't know a lot about Michael Fagan's or about this one or about that one. And so you can review the information. I sometimes will look at the information before I start calling and make some really brief notes to myself. That helps, but it's also okay to say, I don't know. And you can give along a candidate's website. Pretty much everybody in this Virginia cycle is going to be more or less on the same page, so it's less of an issue. But the Norfolk area of Virginia may have some very different positions than the western part of the state if we end up calling out there. And so it helps to sort of look and have some idea. But when you're starting a conversation, as Jane and John were talking about, ask for, their main concerns. What are you worried about? And finding common ground is a really great way, rather than using the sort of the democratic environmental stuff. A lot of times I'll say, everybody's for clean air and water. It's a more neutral kind of way to start. Nobody wants dirty water. Nobody wants dirty air. And then, what are you concerned about? And if you can find some way to connect with people, that's really great. Or you can share your own reasons for being concerned. If you get a young woman, a lot of times these scripts and the information on the voter have their ages. The age is a wonderful way to think about how to approach somebody. If you get a young woman, you might talk about women's rights. Sometimes it changes how I address people. If I get somebody and they're 84, I might call them Mrs. or ma'am. You work on different ways to kind of interact, but it's a pretty natural thing. You don't waste time on somebody who's not going to be with you. Don't argue. One thing that's happened that nobody's brought up is there are some people that have these auto answers, and it takes a minute sometimes to realize that you're being played with. And I got one caller once, we were calling Michigan, and somebody told me he was out in the lake fishing, and it was this long thing. I finally realized it wasn't a real person. It was some kind of a bot that was doing something. But Jane, we went backwards.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But you don't need to waste time on a bot or on somebody who's not going to vote Democratic or not going to vote for the candidate. Take a break. One of the great things about Scale to Win is that it allows you to sort of take a pause and get up and stretch or get a glass of water, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. And do not take negative comments personally. They don't know you. One of the great things about these auto dialers is your number and all of your personal information is masked. Nobody can find you. Nobody's going to come after you. So I had a guy in Florida once, we were calling down into Key West, really chew me out. It was just horrible. And it was awful to listen to, but he didn't know who I was and he couldn't trace me, and you just move on and you kind of try and just laugh it off. But again, at the end, it's really cathartic to come back and talk to everybody about, I can't believe this guy said this. I mean, he called me an effing this and an effing that, and it's like, but then you talk about the great calls. So we celebrate the great calls, we celebrate community, and they do happen. And if I can do it, as I say, if I can do it, you all can do it, because it isn't my natural comfort zone.
Okay, nice. All right, so that takes you through some of the phone banking 101. And we hope that we've made you feel a little more comfortable with it. If you join us at some of our upcoming phone banks, there are a couple of dates here on the screen. We'll continue to train you. We can take you through the dialer that we'll be using and the script that we'll be using that night. We'll be there to help you all the way, and you'll just feel good about what you're doing. So we hope you'll join us then. Look out for us on Mobilize, and we'll send notifications when we're all set up. And that concludes our program. If you want more information about Jaywalkers or Indivisible Montgomery, you can grab these QR codes and sign up or learn more. And with that, I think we're ready for some Q&A. We've got a few minutes left. Let's see if there are any questions. Susan, did you
Yes,
collect any questions?
Yes, one question was, can someone talk about talking to persuade versus listening to persuade?
That's a great question. Anytime that you can prompt people to get them talking about what's important to them, to let them talk for a little while, that that can really help you build a connection with that person, because they feel heard, and so that's a very effective method. Um, we do want to, we don't want to have half an hour phone calls, right? So you want to prompt people and see if you can get them talking, and if 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 they're talking and feeling like having a conversation with you, then you try and address the issues that are coming out in what they're talking about, and see if you can steer them back, connect it to the candidates in some way, and try and get moved on. There are some people who really, just kind of want to talk for as long as they can keep you on the phone for, and you have to sort of steer clear of that. But listening is very important in any conversation in life anyway, and it's the same on these phone banks.
Grab this QR code if you want it, because I'll pull the share off, and that way we can actually see each other and talk.
I William has
Yes.
raised his hand here.
Right, one more question from the
Oh,
chat that you answered,
okay.
but just so everyone sees the answer. Can we choose which candidates we call for?
Right. So sometimes we are able to provide a choice. Sometimes we literally can give you a choice between two different dialers and two different candidates. But often we've already designated that phone bank for a particular candidate. We try and have ongoing conversations with all of our volunteers so that we know if there's a particular affinity developing among our volunteer base for particular candidates, and then we would certainly make an effort to get set up to make calls for those candidates. Generally, people might find an affinity for a delegates candidate in Virginia, and I was talking to the Spanberger campaign today. We can go to them and say, hey, everybody really likes Elizabeth Guzman and wants to help her get elected, and so they can set up a phone bank that's for Abigail Spanberger, but we're calling into Elizabeth Guzman's district and also talking about her. So yes, we can try and customize as best we can.
Someone wrote, Sheldon asked, what are you doing that's better than the Democrats did in phone banking in 2024?
Well,
That's an interesting question.
that is. So, one thing that I say about this is the real persuasion happens from the candidates. So we'll have to see what candidates develop. Abigail Spanberger is a wonderful candidate, and we've seen her be really successful in Virginia, in a very mixed part of Virginia, in a part of Virginia where it's not necessarily a slam dunk for Democrats to win. Um, our job really is to follow the lead of the campaign. The campaigns set the tone. They choose the talking points. The candidates are the ones out there on the stump, and our job is to help them do the work. Um, and we are constantly trying to get better at what we do, and get better at providing information and training volunteers and all that. But I think you know, we'll see. We'll see what we do better.
There was another question in the chat from Kim about her phone number showing up. I know that doesn't happen, but can you guys, either Jane or John, can you explain why? She doesn't want her personal phone number to be
Right.
revealed.
So with the dialer systems, and I think with OpenVPB now, you're actually dialing on your computer, and the system actually masks your phone number. It actually shows a different phone number, that's some local number or something that the system generates. So they're not like they're not going to be able to see what your phone number is or who you are or any of that information.
We have one more in the chat, but William had his hand raised, so why don't we let him ask his question?
Sure.
I'm confused, and it may well be that I didn't get the link until 8:22, so I missed the first part of the presentation. I used to call for jaywalkers, and I'm trying to figure out if we're talking about the same kind of setup. It used to be that you would go to someone's home, they'd be hosting a calling session, and everybody would bring laptops, and the host would provide food and drink, and we'd all call. But is that not what's happening? Are you doing it now individually from home on your own computer?
So the short answer to that question is yes. We're mostly doing it from home now on Zooms like this, using systems that are on the computer. Um, we we all of us in some way miss those days, even though as organized from an organizer's point of view, it was quite a lift to have those events. One thing that in those days when everything was done in person at people's houses, you'd have to have a phone bank in Rockville and one in Bethesda and one in Silver Spring. And now all of those phone banks are one phone bank on Zoom at the same time. So it's much easier and more efficient, which is great. But there is something, that community sense of all us coming together and breaking a little bread, sipping a little wine, talking amongst ourselves, and that's we try and salvage that as best we can within the Zoom by having these conversations and these trainings and coming back after the phone bank and debriefing and telling stories about the conversations we had, and then we provide our own cookies and wine, I guess, and we do the best we can. But yes, mostly it's done on computer at this point.
So
Thank you.
Elsa asks, do you target certain regions of the state? For example, she lives in a very red county, and she read that small wins in rural counties push Trump up to that 2% for the win.
Right. Um, I, I I like to tell this story from the Obama campaign. When you have a lot of volunteers, it's easier to do that. Obama had a ton of volunteers. I was a new volunteer in the '08 campaign, and we called on a very, very red list, and everybody was yelling and saying racist things to us, and it was a little bit of a tough list. And then I got an older lady on the phone who confessed to me that in spite of the fact that her parents and her husband and her children and some of her grandchildren were all staunch Republicans, she was going to vote for Obama. And I said, "Your secret's safe with me. Do you need a ride to the polls?" And I that was such a victory on that phone bank. Cut to 2 months later, my brother and I are canvassing in a very, very red district of Virginia, and we're knocking on doors, and there's literally signs on the lawn that say McCain Palin, and we're knocking on doors, and they answer, and it's a lovely couple, and one of them, the wife, is a Democrat, and she's going to vote. She's going to vote for Obama, and they're giggling because I'm looking nervously at the signs, and they said, "Well," she said, "Well, I figured since we're going to win, he could have the lawn." Um, but they said they'd never had any Democrat knock on their door before. It is a huge deal if you can cut into the margins in what are considered red or blue districts. Trump apparently cut into the margins in blue districts. Um, I, I don't want to get into what I think about how that happened, um, but the old-fashioned way to do it is to reach out to those people and find them. And what you really need to do that is you need manpower to make the phone calls early to identify the people, and then you need manpower, volunteer power later on in the game to actually go knock on their door and make sure that they actually come out and vote.
But
Which means we need you,
Yeah,
right?
we
Which
need you
means
and
we need
ours.
your help
But-
to do that.
Yeah.
to answer the question also in a different way, the campaign determines the calling list on any
Right.
given night.
That's
We
correct.
don't get to say we want to call this red district. The campaign is providing the calling list and the access to the calling list. So it's whatever they've decided where they need calling. And so we don't have a lot of say about that. You know,
Right, unless we're saying we prefer a candidate, which they're open
Right.
to. But also they have a lot of information. They're constantly strategizing about that, and they're constantly looking at their resources and the number of volunteers they have available and the number of programs, what kind of programs are they running in different places, and they're making decisions in real time about how to allocate their volunteer resources to the right place at the right time. So it's our job to kind of support them as they work that out for their candidate.
Okay, one last question from the chat. Christine asked, can I use my iPad to call? She chose no phone connection and but it's a new iPad. So Jane had mentioned iPads are harder, but you can do it with an iPad
Without a
Most of
phone
the
connection,
time.
though.
most
Yeah.
of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know about that no phone connection
Right.
because you
no,
are
it works. You can.
okay.
If
You
you're on
just need an
Wi-Fi with it,
internet
yeah.
connection.
You use
Yeah.
it, you need to use your own cell phone
Right.
so the Wi-Fi provides the screen and the script
Right.
on the iPad, but it
Right.
won't allow you to do an audio through the iPad. But you
Right.
do, as long as you've got Wi-Fi, you can get on your iPad, you can use your cell phone or
Right.
even a landline phone and call.
Right.
You have to make the option to begin with that you're going to call, as Jane was talking about, that you're going to call through a device, through a cell phone or a device, but it is possible. The iPads are a little different. The controls are a little different for some of the scripts and the dialing programs. They're in different places. As William was saying, when we were all sitting together shoulder to shoulder, it was easier to show somebody. It's a little harder on a Zoom to navigate with somebody who's unfamiliar, but it is possible to do for sure.
Yeah, we've worked a lot of that stuff out. It varies from system to system, how well an iPad will work. The Scale to Win system is really great because it's so simple. So I think it's more likely. Open VPB, you probably use just your phone, right? If you're doing that, but it varies from system to system. It depends on what call system is being used.
That brings us to 9:01. So I think we better wrap up to make sure we're respecting everybody's time, right? I just learned a lot myself from you guys. Thank you so much. I thought this was terrific. Just to repeat, we are recording this. We'll send out the recording of the meeting. It'll also be up on our YouTube channel, which is very easy to find on YouTube. Just search Indivisible Montgomery, and all of our videos and trainings are up there. So, Jay Walkers, thanks a million.
Thank
See you on
you,
the phone.
Thank you
Dee.
guys so
Thank
much for
you.
coming. It's
Thank
great to see
you.
everybody.
Hope to see everybody.
We
We're
hope to
friendly.
see
We
you
really
again.
are. We're very user friendly.
It's true.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.